All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is going to be a quick overview introduction in terms of regeneration as a process. Ultimately, our work is about staying in the game of evolution. That's what sustainability is really all about. So how do we actually employ projects to get there? Let me see how I can advance this. So a little bit of perspective. This we call the trajectory of ecological design. We can point out that we're here. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but a conventional design. We build our buildings, our projects, our infrastructure, one step better than breaking the law. As Randy Croxton says, we move to green design, which means, well, we can do better than code. So LEED or BREEAM or any of the rating systems, Green Star, come along, and this means we can do 50, 60, 70, 100, maybe 80% better than existing conditions in terms of energy usage, carbon in the atmosphere, toxicants in the environment, and so on. And that implies that if 70% is good, then 100% is great. And this is why the net zero movement is predominant. So that leads to what we might call sustainability, and how we generally refer to sustainability as less bad, or as Bill McDonough says, when sustainability is a slower way to die, because as long as we are doing less bad, we are not improving the conditions, and we know that we're continually degrading it. So with all these rating systems out there, we are still losing the battle. So we need to flip then, from our perspective anyway, into this green zone is to restore, beginning to restore the damage we've caused. And there's a distinction between restoration and regeneration. I want to make that point today, is that restoration means that we are restoring in an ecological subsystem, such as a wetland, a forest, a beach dune system, a riparian corridor. We're restoring the self-organizing capability for an ecosystem to evolve. Regeneration builds on that by saying, what is humans' role in that, and how do we actually rebirth our relationship when new situations and systems emerge? Evolution happens. How do we stay in that game of evolution? And regeneration is an activity that asks us to participate as co-evolutionary partners. So that is not saying that working in this red zone is bad, it is just insufficient. And so we do need to do green work. We do need to limit the damage in our technical world. We also need to work explicitly in the living systems world. Both, if you will, both sides are required. So also, this is an ecology. This is not the environment. We're not saving the environment, that which is outside of us. An ecology includes us. It is the whole living system. So how do we include us in this process? How do we include the community? So another way to interpret this is from Carol Sanford's work, the regenerative business consultant, that at this conventional level is basically extracting value. We pull ore from the earth, nutrients from the soil. If we're a rotten company, we pull spirit from our staff. So we can do better. So we can slow down the damage, arrest disorder, as I like that expression, but it's really slowing down the damage. Better, let's do good. So we move into the do good paradigm, and do good would be great if it was really good. But in fact, do good can actually be quite bad if we are not working with the system on its own terms. And so we can look at the International Development Bank and World Bank's work in Africa and other countries where they're imposing a European or North American view of what good is on cultures that actually never asked for it. And so do good can be quite negative. It is actually a form of colonialism, unless we're very careful. So what does it mean to be careful? And that moves into that last paradigm, evolving inherent potential. Let me just define that, because this is pretty important. Whether with people or life sheds, every living entity asks that we approach it individually to reveal and support its unique potential. So a quick example of that is this little girl likely wants to be an airplane pilot. She has that inherent potential in her essence nature, if you will. Or this ecosystem in Zimbabwe that Alan Savory worked with wants to be a savanna. We've forgotten how to actually interact with it, but without getting into the details of how this restoration happened, just by actually managing the way cattle graze, allowed the restoration of this system to work, working with the inherent nature of this place. This civil engineer's view of a stream in Baltimore, Maryland, which was actually constructed for a good reason, because we didn't understand how to stop the total suspended solids from being ripped up. But once we understood how to retain water and reduce its force, this is what this stream looks like 3 years later, the bottom photograph. Nature wants to recover. We just need to actually learn to work with her on our own terms. And the same thing with cities. Cities are living organisms. So how do we as architects, developers, engineers, inhabitants work with these places on their own terms, which requires us to get to know them as unique living entities. So regenerative development projects seek to understand and develop the inherent potential in everyone and every living system they touch. Regenerative design then emerges from that understanding. So we start out here and we work in. So some quick examples of this. This is an old project of ours, but it's a very elegantly simple one. It's a food co-op, a grocery store in Brattleboro, Vermont. And they wanted to do a LEED gold grocery store. We asked them if they actually wanted to do LEED or they wanted to do sustainability, because there's a difference. And they gave a great answer. They said they wanted to do both. So we took a quick 5 minutes of research on food. The average bite of food in the United States travels 3,600 miles. So the carbon in the food is a heck of a lot more impactful than simply exchanging more efficient refrigeration cases. We also looked at the inherent potential of this system. And the potential in this place actually fit right in with this understanding of food, because there's a strong localization movement. The slow food movement is actually one of the birthplaces of the slow food movement. The March of the Heifers they have every spring. So this is definitely a food and landscape oriented place. So they would relate to this actually a process. And the first thing that we did when we met with the executive committee is we toured the grocery store, and the first apple bin that we came to in the produce section was the apple bin, and the apples came from New Zealand. So you can see where these 3,600 miles come from. Strawberries from California, blueberries from Chile. So there's a lot that we can do. And the first thing is, how do we actually, we asked the question, what happens if there's a truckers strike? And they said, well, we're out of business in 2 days. What happens if there's a grocery store chain that moves into town? Well, we're probably out of business in a year. So the one thing that a trucker strike or grocery store chain can't compete with is local food. And so this became a study of how do we bring back food again, because every green splotch you see here, light and dark green, are actually farms that have been abandoned over the last 50 years. The soil has been degraded with multiple periods of extraction, lumbering and grazing, as well as agriculture. The best food was in downtown Brattleboro. So we said, why don't we start reestablishing gardens back here? Because we fed our towns during World War II with victory gardens. So this grocery store, the brief for this grocery store, the program, was an agricultural and soil extension service to teach people how to grow their own food again, a cannery where they would can their food, a daycare center to take care of the kids when the adults were doing that work, an abattoir for hunters to dress their meat because this is a hunting area, a forest service extensions to be able to work on restoring the land in this degraded ecosystem, a credit union to loan money for local farmers, and by the way, a grocery store. So that's quite an extensive program, and it's not going to be accomplished all at once. But the result was that we ended up that the president realized that the building itself wasn't as important as we thought. The co-op developed a 100-year ends policy out of this work to begin to establish this kind of thinking. Not only that, this little pebble in the water not only worked on the ecosystem and the food system in this immediate region around this town, but in this diagram here, it shows that other co-ops in the New England region asked the Brattleboro Co-op for help and assistance in developing the same kind of program with them. So this one little pebble became a rippling effect, And that's the power of regeneration, not just one building at a time, but nested systems of place and life expanding. A quick other example is a project we're working on right now. This is anywhere from an $8 to $10 billion infrastructure project in Vancouver, British Columbia. We had done one wastewater treatment plant previously, about 6-8 years ago, and the primary aim for that was
Sorry,
saving.
Bill, quick interruption. You're at 5 minutes, just FYI.
Okay, thank you. The aim for that was saving the taxpayers' money. Not very motivational, not inspirational, and then we flipped that wastewater treatment plant to actually become a community organizing space, where in fact that one of the outcomes of that wastewater treatment plant is that they would actually they wanted to be able to hold weddings there. It wanted to be that level of community organizing and community development, where they'd be so proud of the place where they would hold weddings there. A little bit of a stretch, but not much. Then we went to this next project, and because of that work, they said, this is not just about building a wastewater treatment plant. This is about saving the orca whales, not just reducing the toxicity to secondary treatment, but how do we actually create drinkable water out of this plant and begin to work with the community to not only do a relatively benign and beautiful wastewater treatment plant, but to actually begin to engage not just the people immediately around this plant, but the system of activists who related in reciprocity and developing motivation to actually work together to solve multiple problems at the same time. Not just slowing down the damage with the wastewater treatment plant, but how do we expand that work to work together to heal the system? So one benefit of this, and this is a terrible slide, but I wanted to show it because that's the chief of staff of the Musqueam people. They had been negotiating for over 30 years with exchanging lawyers back and forth about developing, reconciling relationships on the original Musqueam land, which is what Vancouver's located on. And as a result of 2 meetings here where they saw the ability to integrate 150 different designers, engineers, and activists into working together, they said, we want to be part of that. And if you actually emphasize these priorities, we will be well on the way to being reconciled. So just this process begins to cohere and create meaningful engagement. So the idea here is your project is not the project in regenerative development. The project is the system of life. And how do we inspire people and engage people to work together on that system? Climate change, for instance, is a problem or is a symptom of a major problem of not understanding life and our role in it. We will never be able to solve climate change unless we solve the system as a whole. Even if we solve climate change tomorrow, we will still be destroying the planet with multiple other negative impacts. So what Elinor Ostrom proved to us is that we can't heal the earth. It's too big, it's too abstract. The tragedy of the commons is operative, as Garrett Hardin talked about. But what Elinor Ostrom proved in her Nobel laureate work on common pool resources, that we can save the earth place by place. Because places are places that we can manage, and we can see the feedback of that system. So every project is an opportunity to activate place. And so Simone Weil says, place is a doorway into caring. Love of place unleashes the personal and political will needed to make profound change. We are social beings and we want to be in relationship, but we've lost common purpose. And if we can actually help people understand the potential for a thriving and healthy system, that's our home. That's what we care about. It's not politics, it's not race, it's not religion, it's our home. It's a very neutral and powerful mediating device. And the last aspect of this is that this has to be a practice. It is not a deliverable. So this kind of work builds the will to have a continual practice in place. And I'll finish with a quote, a paraphrase from Christopher Alexander in his honor. He passed away a couple of weeks ago. When you build or restore, you cannot merely do this in isolation, but must also repair the world around it and within it, so that the large world in this one place becomes more coherent and more whole. And that which you make takes its place in the web of nature as you make it. Thank you.